So at Concordia this semester we are doing squirrel research, and there hasn't been a lot of studies done on the relationship between red squirrels and gray squirrels in like an urban setting. So we're looking at like the spatial relationships between the two species as well as like their behaviors since they are in an urban setting and they're surrounded by a lot of people. So we set live traps out around campus and we go out and check them. And when we get a squirrel, we bring them into the lab and we put a collar on them, and each of the collars has like a unique frequency, so we can use a transmitter and a receiver to go out around campus and track their locations and observe their behaviors.
So we got interested in doing this project with urban squirrels on a college campus because literature tends to indicate that college campuses have a much higher population of squirrels than even undisturbed woodlands. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of space, and they seem to do really well in urban settings. And college campuses in particular tend to have a lot of green space, and people tend to, it seems like, plant a lot of mast trees or trees that produce a lot of food for the squirrels. Therefore, they do quite well on the campus. Well, starting at the beginning, we would set live traps. We've been using peanut butter largely, so they'll come in for the peanut butter. They get caught in a live trap, and we tend to walk the traps and check them about every 10-15 minutes. The collar itself puts out a radio signal, basically a beep or just a pulse, and that pulse is picked up by the antenna, and basically the antenna then transfers it to the receiver, and we would then hear an auditory beep to it. So the collar itself, you don't hear anything, and the transmitter itself, you don't actually hear anything unless you've got the receiver, and that converts the signal into something we can hear audibly. So this is called a homing technique. Here we're able to walk up to the actual tree they're in, then we're able to pretty much ID our particular individual when we see the collar. At least some of the gray squirrels seem to be nesting together in the same tree dens. So as the winter goes on, if that will change because of increased competition for the resources that are there. Both gray and red squirrels have a different foraging technique. Gray squirrels will scatter hoard, which means they'll find food and place it all around. So the idea is when they're wandering, they will tend to run into food periodically. Whereas the red squirrels do it very differently. They have a centralized larder hoard, is what they call it, where they'll put everything right in one spot in their tree, and then they defend it very, very strongly. And we've been putting beads on them, colored beads, with the hope that we're going to be able to ultimately then, if we see one, and for instance, if a student's walking on campus or one of the research students is walking around campus and doesn't have the telemetry equipment, they could actually note where they've seen some of the squirrels. There's a couple different sizes of tracking collars. So you've got one slightly smaller for red squirrels, slightly larger for gray squirrels.